Everybody, Kevin McNulty here with another episode of Grow Yourself from the Inside Out. I remember reading quite some time ago a statement that Socrates made. He said that the unexamined life is not worth living. And I don't know if one can necessarily say that that's true, but if it were true, the question is, how do you do that? And especially today, there's so much noise, there's tons of distraction. How do you examine yourself or your life when there's all of this noise around you? We're getting pulled in so many different directions. We're busy. Where do you go? How do you spend time, reflecting in such a way, examining your life? I also hear people say that they want to find themselves. So, same question. Where do you go? Where do you go to find yourself? Well, that's really the topic for this episode. Actually, it's not so much about finding yourself, but my guest actually puts it quite differently. She went on a journey, again, not to find herself, but to find out more about who she is. So my guest is Nancy Lane. She's a person who recently took a journey to learn, as I said, more about herself. She's one of those people who has a big zest for life. She's also has a great love and appreciation for the people that God puts in, places in her life to travel, this journey with her. She's definitely a people person, an immediate connector. This attribute played well throughout her 35-year career as a leader, where she was able to positively impact organizations and people on a very large scale. She recently retired a full-time career, and this has allowed her to transition into other areas of life, such as coaching and mentoring, and spending more time with her family and her friends. Nancy's also a thinker. She's a seeker. I call these people yearners, who looks for opportunities and experiences that will give her wisdom and insight, where she'll learn about herself, other people, about her faith, or her life's purpose. So always, up for an adventure. Nancy has done some really cool things throughout her life. She hitchhiked around Europe in her 20s. She skydived at 51. She's camped, in the Sahara Desert and whitewater rafted in Nepal. I mean, just for starters. But today we're going to talk about her most recent life-seeking journey. Actually, it was more than that. Nancy recently completed the Camino del Santiago pilgrimage, walking 400 miles across Spain with only a backpack. She's going to tell us about, how she, step by step, discovered new insights about her life, her purpose, God, and becoming, as I said, more of herself. Well, hello there, Nancy.
Hi, good morning, Kevin.
Goodness gracious, it's so good to be with you. It's been a couple of years, I think.
Yes, I think so.
And you and I kind of had talked about that we're not really going to use this word retirement, but you retired at least your career for now and off to a new chapter in your life. Is that right?
It is. I retired in December of 2019. The time's
Goodness
flying by.
gracious. And now you're living out in Arizona. You were up in the Quad Cities in Illinois, and
Yes.
now you're in Arizona. My
Yes.
goodness, life is good.
Yes.
Nancy, I'll be honest with you. I think there are so many things that we can talk about, and what your life and your experience, and what I know about you, not just from what I've personally met, having personally known you, but what so many people have said about you in the professional world. I'm just so excited to have you here and just share your wisdom and your life with everybody. And there's some really interesting things that you have done that I can't wait to talk about it. But honestly, I don't even know where to start. There's so much to talk about. So why don't we just start with me asking, who is Nancy Lane? Where did she come from, and how did you end up in the spot that you're in right now?
Well, so I grew up in the Midwest, And I ended up working in college. I ended up getting, like, back in the day, it was called a co-op, I think. So it was like when you're in college, you can have some work experience. And
Mm,
that landed me with the government, with the Department of Army, Fort
mm,
McCoy, Wisconsin.
mm.
And I really thought it was going to be a short gig. I was really drawn to, after doing a short internship, I was drawn to it because of people were able to work for the government and then they could go live in different places and, like, live in Europe.
Yeah.
So part of my passion, one of my favorite things always has been to travel. You know, I grew up in a family in Wisconsin that we did what a lot of families did back in the 70s and stuff, is we camped. I mean, my parents didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of money, so we just camped and we went to national parks and we fished and we hiked.
KOAs.
Yes, the KOAs. And my dad would always seek out these remote state parks. We wanted to go to more KOAs, but we were out in the woods, you know.
No kidding.
So I've always loved nature, travel, seeing different places. And so when I was working for the Department of Army during college, I had became aware that people went and lived in Europe. They, worked for the Army and went and lived in Germany. I'm thinking, man, I'm going to do that. So that was kind of my first thing, was I'm going to work for the government for a few years, go live in Germany, and then I'll see where life takes me. Well, that just started what turned out to be a wonderful career.
Wow.
So I ended up working for the Department of Army in Human Resources, starting as a student hire and ending as a director of an organization in Human Resources for 37 years.
My goodness.
And it really turned out to be a great career. A lot of it was the people that I had the privilege of working with were just fabulous. And the Army had a compelling mission. You felt like the work that we
That's
did,
right.
we knew that the work we did was important to the soldiers and their families. And so I look back on that, and it was just a great way to spend a career. But it
Yes.
started with really a passion for travel and wanting to see the world,
Yes. And for those who are not familiar with either the military or the Department of Defense or civil service, you made it to a high rank. I mean, you made it to the equivalent of a colonel in the civilian world, and that's not an easy feat, to make it that high. I know many strive for it. And so you really experienced that full career from, as you said, starting off as a bit of an intern all the way up to the executive levels where you're really in policy making positions. And I know that the organization that you worked with had, just a wide reach in terms of human resources.
Yeah.
And so let me just ask then, so you retired in December of 2019 and then moved to Arizona. You must have felt like a fish out of water, right? I mean, this is just like an abrupt change.
Yes. I had been in the Quad Cities in that same location, done a lot of work travel, but, developed relationships over 30 years. And I am definitely like a relationship kind of person. I had church groups and book clubs and an outdoor club, and I had a lot of friends and a rhythm to my life, so to speak.
Wow. Yes.
And I think I know I underestimated the change that I would feel when my husband and I then moved to the Phoenix area. And what I kind of learned from that, when it talks about a lot of what you talk about on your podcast, is that growth and growing and transforming, was that I think we often think that because we're looking forward to something, because there's a lot of goodness. So the move was good. We have two sons. They both live in the Phoenix area. My mother is aging and was going to stay in the Phoenix area then. She had only been wintering, but we were going to have her stay out here since I was moving. So family was this huge,
wow.
This was going to be exciting, that I was going to be, my husband and I would be with the family in Phoenix. So I think what I learned from that is, just because you might be moving from A to B and it's some kind of a transition, there's always loss. So even though you're looking forward to good things, there still is a recognition that there's some things that you will grieve, you will lose.
That's right.
And I don't think I didn't know that. I know that now. but I hadn't been through something like this. So definitely that loss of that rhythm of my past life of 30 years of friendships, of relationships that were easy. And, you know, I'm making new friends out here. I'm developing, you know, a new structure to my life, but I don't have any history with anyone out here, right? There's no past,
Wow,
there's no shared experiences.
yes, that's
So I think
fascinating.
that it's now this acknowledgement, and I think I can have empathy, a
Mhm.
new empathy in this area, that even though somebody is onto something that's good and exciting, that doesn't always mean that it's all good and exciting. There's
Right.
still some loss and there's still some transition. So I felt a bit, I mean, I'd like to use the word a bit untethered for a while.
Okay. Yes.
Um, you know, 37 years of working in a job that I
That's
loved with some of those people I had worked with for 20, 25 years. They were my dear friends by the time I retired, and then all my other friends and associates. That it was a bit of a transition. It was a little hard.
I can imagine, and you know, and I think it's also important to note, and I've spoken about this before, that you were also in a rather unique culture. So for 37 years being in this, you know, let's just call it, even though obviously you're a civilian, a civil servant,
Yeah.
but you were in a military culture, and
Yes.
that is drastically different than the private sector. So it's not as though you were living in the Quad Cities, you know, working in the private sector there and all
Mhm.
this. You were in, and then you move and you're still in the private sector. You were in a very
Oh, yeah.
different culture. And so when you stepped out of that, and I told people when I wrote this in my book, when I got out of the Air Force, and I grew up as a military brat, and then 20 years in the Air Force, so it was almost 40 years. I tell people it's like, and like you, I didn't realize what was going to hit me, but it was like moving to China. I had no idea about, I mean, we exist in the private sector, but I had no idea what, you know, what this world was like.
Yeah.
And so it had to have been very similar for you. Again, going, you know, going every morning, and you have to show your ID to get onto the base, and then you're working in this big, heavy policy oriented scenario at very high levels in the Army, and then suddenly not only do you move out of that, but then you retire the career, and you're
Yes.
kind of probably going like, okay, now what?
Yes.
What do I do?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Wow. So then I can't wait to launch into this piece, because I think it's kind of primarily what we're going to talk about when we talk about grow yourself from the inside out. And I've always known you to be a, you know, really a coach and a mentor for many people in the realm of professional development and leadership. And I know you're doing some of that now as well. But you ended up on this, you know, speaking of your outdoor life, you ended up taking this pilgrimage, right? The Camino del Santiago, I believe it's called,
Yeah.
over in Spain. And you discovered something more about your life. Is that right? Can you
Yes.
just
Yes.
first of all tell uh, the viewers, one, what is that, the Camino del Santiago? You know, tell us a little bit about it, and then I just can't wait to launch into this whole personal and spiritual and universal experience that you had and all that comes out of it.
Okay. So many people, if they've heard of the Camino de Santiago, there was a popular Martin Sheen, Emilio
Hmm.
Estevez movie that came out, I don't know, like in 2010 or something.
Yeah.
And so now that many of us have been on the Camino,
The
the movie
Way, I think, or something like
is called
this.
The Way,
Yeah.
and it gives you kind of a gist of why people do that or what it is. So that was popular. You know, I really can't remember now if I saw that movie. I don't think so. I don't think I saw that movie until after I had heard about
Oh.
the. So it was really just through conversation with some other people that were like, we were hikers, and somebody mentioned that they knew somebody that went on this long walk across Spain, and this was probably
Mm.
about 5 years ago. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. Now, my motivation at that time, because I really didn't know a lot about it, was I liked that idea of having something that I would have to like be disciplined to kind of maybe train for. It would maybe make me walk more, hike more, you know, just some destination like that. And then I liked the idea of the
Mhm.
length. It was going to be
Yes.
4 to 6 weeks. And I thought, I'm going to do that when I retire. But I was kind of approaching it like I did a lot of my other travels, which would be the itinerary, the culture, the tempo of it, you know, just that whole travel things like how we normally travel. So I started to do my research and started to talk to others and read and join some Facebook groups. So for a couple of years, I've been following kind of things about the Camino and learning about it. So what it really is it's quite fascinating. It dates back to the Middle Ages. Wow. And pilgrims at one point, like in the 8th and 9th century, it was one of the most popular pilgrimages for Christians. The St. James, who purportedly had been spreading the gospel in the region of Galicia, Spain, at one point. From what I've read, he wasn't very successful at the time, went back to Jerusalem, and it was really after he died that some people brought his remains purportedly back to Spain, and is buried under the cathedral in Santiago. So,
now, just to be clear, this is St. James, right? Jesus' brother, right?
Yes. And St. James is the patron saint of Spain because of
okay.
So back in those Middle Ages, pilgrims began to, you know, many believed at that time in Christian history that you must, you know, come to some kind of a sacred place to pilgrimage in repentance or prayer or sacrifice and suffering. So when you think of that for, you know, over 1200 years or whatever, people have been walking this path to the cathedral in Santiago, Spain, is quite amazing. So there's really, if you look into it, there's many different ways. As they say, all different roads lead to Rome, just as it is in Santiago. There's 7 kind of well-known routes that can start anything like the northern route. There's a Portuguese route. But the route that I walked is the most common, and it is the one that's featured in the movie The Way, and it's the Camino Frances. It starts on the border of Spain or France, and it's 500 miles, or 890 kilometers along this path that takes you up through kind of the northern part of Spain through 4 different regions, and on a pilgrimage. So back to the Middle Ages, though, which was cool back then, is it was quite dangerous also for people to be walking this pilgrimage. And so the Knights Templar, which many of us have heard of, that was really what they were developed to do, is to protect the pilgrims along the way. And so back then, even dating way back, there was infrastructure that started to pop up along that way, churches that would house pilgrims. You know, people would feed the pilgrims. I mean, it was just a really well-respected, it's a huge part of Spanish history, is these pilgrimages. So fast forward, people have been doing this. They estimate it's down a little bit with COVID, but I mean, it can be, I think even last year, the year that I walked it, almost 179,000 people completed that pilgrimage. Starting at different points, you know, people can start at different points. Some people start as far away as, we met people that started in Paris, or one gentleman I met in his 30s, he started in the Netherlands. So people can start from wherever. But so anyway, so what I did was, in about 30 days, I started in Logrono, Spain, and walked about 400 miles over 30 days.
Wow.
So
I thought it was like a 10-day deal.
Some people do it for 10 days. So we can talk about that. You know, there's a lot of different ways. I'll share my experience, but when you start really looking into the pilgrimage and the reason people do it and how they do it, there's no wrong way. And there's a lot of different varieties of how people do it. Some people do it for 10 days because that's what they'll get. That's their journey. They'll get whatever. We always say you'll get whatever you want to get out of it. And then other people are walking for months. You know?
So I think part of what we talked about as we were discussing this podcast was this idea, and you mentioned this, that you kind of, you listened and heard people speak about this, and we've all heard this idea of, you know, finding perhaps people do this pilgrimage to find themselves. And you expressed this idea that I thought was fascinating. And you said, this wasn't a circumstance where I necessarily was going to find myself or found myself, but rather you expanded yourself. You found more of yourself. Can you explain that a little bit? I'm not speaking nearly as eloquently about it as you
Yeah.
did when we talked about it, but it was a new way of thinking about these sorts of things.
Yeah, I will share some of my thoughts. It's so fascinating. So some of these thoughts I'll share, maybe some of it dawned on me before I went.
Okay.
Obviously, some came about as I went through my journey, and then others it was upon reflection. But I would say that throughout all of those stages, I didn't quote feel like I was lost somewhere. And again,
Okay.
I can only speak for myself. I don't ever want to come across in the course of this conversation that I'm judging anyone else. Clearly, I met people who described it as they were trying to find themselves. Some people have been through some really difficult circumstances and perhaps felt very, very off track. But I find that, like life, oftentimes, we sometimes automatically assume that we're lost, that we're so lost. I love to hike. It's my favorite thing to do, which also draws me to this pilgrimage. Usually we're never truly completely lost.
Yeah.
We need to be reoriented.
Yes.
That's how it is in life. I think we're too quick sometimes, and I think society convinces people that they're not enough, that they're lost, that they're way off course. I don't know, compared to what? Compared to other people's course? I mean, who's holding the map, right? So what I found is that during this time, retired, moving, had a very, very busy job, raised kids, like many people, their day-to-day life is full. So without all that, well, then what am I? Who am I?
Wow.
Where am I going, right? So I've used the phrase, I guess, perhaps I felt a little untethered, as I said earlier. So when I started this pilgrimage, and really when you think about like what is a pilgrimage versus just a walk, a long walk.
That's a great question. Yes.
Who've walked or hiked the Appalachian Trail, which is a very difficult technical kind of hiker. Or there's walks through the Lake District of England. There's walks across Scotland. There's all things. So what's a pilgrimage? Like what is a pilgrimage? So the pilgrimage, really, by definition, is a transformative journey to a sacred center. We know other world religions that kind of as part of their faith, they go on a pilgrimage. So what is really that about? So for many people, it was the spiritual or Christian journey of this pilgrimage, like to give thought to their faith, for repentance or for prayer. Many others that I met, it was about some kind of spiritual or internal growth through this process of disconnecting from their life for a little bit, right? Getting rid of the noise, bearing down to just minimal, reducing yourself to minimal possessions. There's goodness in all of that. That was a lot of what people recognized. Clearly, most people recognize that. There were others that it was simply a fun thing to do, to spend time with some people that they liked, or even to go out and venture on their own to see who they might meet along the way, right? So there was a lot of different reasons for it. So for me, when I really started thinking about it, it was really about not necessarily feeling like I was so off course, but is there more? What things do I need to, I needed to take stock, I guess. So by the time I thought of it, probably in 2017, by the time I walked it, it was 2021. I was 60 years old. I had turned 60 in August and left in September to go walk this. And so probably it was more about how do I like take stock, or how do I refine this, right? And what a great time, really at this age, what a great time to do that, to think, why not, right? What do I need to like stop doing? what have maybe served me when I was working. Maybe it served me well. But how many times do so many of us bring these things that served us well in our jobs or in our careers, or we identified with, that don't play well in other arenas?
Do you have an example of maybe something like that
Yeah.
that you feel like maybe you carried over into your private world that you in your from your professional world?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, I felt that and maybe I felt like I did it well, I don't know, was that I kind of like was like a ducks in a row kind of person, like I'm going to plan, I'm going to control, I'm going to anticipate so that I can form a plan,
Yeah, you're
what's
going to
going to happen,
manage and you're going to
and manage
yes,
things. Yes. And I think all that, there's nothing wrong with any of that. I just think we can
right.
overplay it, right? Our greatest strengths are our greatest weaknesses, overplayed or played out in the wrong situation.
Mhm.
A fixer, and part of that, I think when you work and you're in a leadership role, I think it's part of it's an illusion maybe that, oh, I have all the answers, because so many people are going, yes, yeah, you can,
And so
so
many people are coming to you from all
yeah,
different
they're coming
angles,
to you,
looking
right?
for answers and solving
Yes.
problems and
So somehow you
yeah.
maybe convince yourself that that's one of your
Mm.
gifts, right? That you just are a
Mhm.
problem solver and a fixer. So what was so interesting is that originally, my original plan when I started thinking about this was I was going to do it alone. A lot of people do it alone. If I'm going to do it
Interesting.
alone, because then
I
it's
can see that.
brutally my Camino. I'm going to do it exactly how I want to do it. I'm going to stay where I want to stay. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. I'm going to sleep where the whole thing, right? And I wanted to do it alone. Well, what happened, my husband wasn't too thrilled about me doing it alone. But what happened is I knew I couldn't do it till after I retired because it takes a long time. And so it wasn't that long after I was into this period of kind of like, okay, now what? That I was talking to a former colleague, great friend, and found out that four of my former, one of the gentlemen that went with us was a previous boss of ours and his wife, and then two former colleagues. They were all going, oh, we're going on this Camino. Oh, I love the Camino. Okay, do you want to come with us? So all of a sudden now I'm in a group. That wasn't really my plan, and as a planner
Interesting,
and all
yes.
that, but I thought, you know what? This is if I'm going to do this, I'm going to accept that this is the way I'm going to do it. So what happened was that now, part of it was my mindset. I was mindful that I needed to, obviously, I was with other people perfectly capable of solving problems. They were
Mhm.
all leaders in their own right and smart people. And so I think it made me put myself into the proper place in that group setting. And that because I was the fifth person added on, which I do believe made it a little bit more inconvenient than trying to do things with four people, I was very
Yeah, I see.
mindful of that. I need to be a little bit more like have a servant attitude and just go along and not have an opinion and just go with it. But that is the lesson that I think I was meant to learn.
Hmm.
So within kind of the Camino philosophy, they'll say things like, you'll hear people even say, the Camino is going to teach you what you need to learn.
Wow.
So whether it's the Camino teaching you, or, I'm a person of faith and I believe that God was out ahead of me in this plan,
Mhm.
that it was intended, it was
Yeah.
intentional, that that's an area that I needed to work on in my life, is
Mm.
to let go a little bit more, not be prideful and haughty in thinking that I have the answers, that I will be the one to solve the problems and lead it. I really then was put in a place of go along, and see what happens. And it taught me through many things to kind of let go, let it go. And guess what
Yeah.
happened? There were times internally I was having dialogue with myself thinking, wow, if it was up to me, I would have done, I want to do that. We should have stayed there. I want to go there. And you know what happened, Kevin? In most cases, as the day played out or the week played out, I would have been wrong a lot of times had I been
That's
left to my own devices. Or, you
how
know what?
interesting.
The other outcome was fine.
Was fine as well.
It was fine as well. And most of the time better. And I thought, in some ways, I did ponder it over many miles of walking of, gosh, I wonder how many times back when I was leading and in my job, had I just stepped aside more often and not run in to fix things, or maybe with my family, that there might have been a better outcome.
You know, this is
Or,
interesting that you say this, Nancy, because I've never kind of seen you that way as, you know, certainly not haughty or sort of a control freak.
yeah,
Those are my words, not
right,
yours. So I never really saw that about you. And, and I think, that's a very important point here because for you, and this is just my perception of you, it's not like you were this mean control freak who, you know, who demanded everything be your way. It was really a much more, um, I would even say maybe a compassionate, empathetic point of view that you may have pursued to control things. So it wasn't this aggressive style, which
right,
we
right.
may associate with, which is very important here because my point is that if you'd have asked me, and I mean, I don't, you know, we're not besties. I don't know
Mhm.
you incredibly well, just over the years, but I would have never suspected that you would have had that you, Nancy Lane, would have learned how to let go and not be in control. So I think part of the lesson here is that these might be things that, with our best of intentions, that we don't realize is part of the
Mhm.
way that we operate in life. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I love that you've pointed out that oftentimes things, this is why I like our conversation about maybe becoming more. So
Mm-hmm.
the conversation we're having right now is, and for most of us, the things that we need to either let go of or do better on, all that, they're not these big glaring, do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of our
Yes.
inside game. And so it doesn't mean that just because you are not displaying this in a
Right.
really outrageous manner, that doesn't mean that there isn't refinement that all of us can
I
use,
love that.
right? And so I think it can just be, some of it might have been my own internal dialogue that I was having at times, thinking, or in a nice, kind, compassionate way, but still trying to, like, oh, maybe we should do this, or how about that, or no, I'm not really comfortable with that. We all can do this
We
and
all
have
can do
these
this.
kinds of things, that we're still doing it in a caring manner. They're not
Yes.
caring,
Yes.
but that doesn't
Yes.
mean that we shouldn't still refine at times, right? And then I think it was even, so I think it could be about circumstances or
Hmm.
this fixing things.
Yes.
And I think the other thing that it taught me, though, was, um, the other thing, it was interesting. So when you're walking this pilgrimage, right? Let me say this, that's so important, is that for me, now again, people can do it differently, but most people, I would say, go with fewer possessions. And
Yeah.
everybody, I
You
mean,
physically can't carry that much
right.
with you,
And
right?
so you can, depending on how much time someone
I
has,
see.
what they really want to get out of it,
Yeah.
and their level of needs, they can have a transport service
I see.
bring their stuff from place to place and have it all planned out. And again, people can find great meaning in all the other in many things that they're doing.
Right.
For me, um, I was going to, I brought everything that I was going to bring in a backpack, which was less than, without water, it was about 11 pounds. So it was literally the clothes I was wearing, another change of clothing, some
I love
like
it.
a pair of shoes, socks, no makeup, nothing. And then you fill it with
Wow.
water and you carry it. Okay. So for
Wow.
me, that was something that I wanted to experience from this point of reducing reducing my existence or my days to a very basic level. Few
Minimalism.
distractions. No, this sounds kind of funny, but maybe not to readers. But even the idea that when I have downtime, which we did have downtime in the evenings and stuff, it was really like we weren't watching TV, not getting on our phones or anything like that. And then I was like, but then I'll read. Well, I didn't bring a book. I'm not going to bring books. It would be too much to carry, or
Yes,
it was
absolutely.
going to be part of this distraction. So here's the deal, is that when everyone is kind of boiled down, many of us are reduced to all that stuff, your status, your occupation, all of that is kind of equalized.
Wow.
Our appearance, right?
You
So
you
as
are
we,
who you are,
you are who you are.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of, give or take a few things, we all kind of looked the same, dressed the same. We all had our 2, 3 pair of
Hmm.
clothes. That's it. So
Wow.
that also begins this internal letting go of things that you may fill your days with, things that you allow to get yourself distracted, right? So, but back to the control thing. So, part of the planning was just that I also then wanted to be physically ready for the challenge as best I could, right?
Yes.
This physical challenge
Hmm.
of walking day after day after day. So, this cumulative effect, this is the other thing that's, I think, interesting about a long pilgrimage. And when I say long, for some people, 2 weeks of walking is
I mean, that's yeah.
incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
A week of walking every day
Yeah.
is you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
So a month of walking every day, 15 to 20 miles a day, that cumulative effect of that, again, is a great equalizer. I mean, there were people that were marathon runners and they still got shin splints or tendonitis, blisters. I
Can't
mean,
imagine.
the
Yeah.
Camino doesn't discriminate,
Yeah.
And so I was at my age a little like, I hope I can do this. And so I did have a book, like many people have the Bible, and it has all the stages and the mileages and the elevation. And I would look at that and how much elevation, and oh, I wonder where there's going to be water, and what if I have to go to the bathroom. So I didn't really, again, this is all about refinement, right? So
Yeah,
what was
and control, right? I mean,
right? That was
yes.
that was a, and again, reasonable. I don't, it's not anything
Sure.
that I would need to go
Yeah.
to therapy for. A lot of people do
Right.
that. You're just kind of
Yeah,
reading
you're
and looking at it.
planning and right.
But then I would see something. So this was interesting too, is I would, you start making these pilgrim friends along the way. And I would remember one day going up to, I think his name was Jake, and probably in his 30s, and he's sitting at a picnic table. And I knew he was American. I knew he'd speak my language. So I said, hey, have you looked at the route for tomorrow and the elevation, and are you thinking this or that? And he's looks at me and he's like, nope. Oh, what about the weather? No,
I have
no.
no idea.
And I'm like, do you ever look at this stuff or plan it? And he said, no, it doesn't matter. We're going to get up and we're going to walk.
Start walking.
And that's what we're going to do,
I
right?
love that.
And that happened to me twice. I asked somebody else one time when I was in one of my states of like, okay, so like, do you know is it really steep? Does it do switch? I mean, I was trying to, and same thing as like, no. And I thought, you know, there's a lesson there, right? Sometimes about life too.
Yes.
Like maybe just get up in the morning, with reasonable planning, and just, you're going to go about the day, and
And
you're going to
just
you're going to get yourself through it, and not to do this over planning and what about this and what about that. And so just those exchanges, I thought, yeah.
but
There's there's a saying as well. A lot of it's the Camino provides it, but there's another saying, and they say the difference between, again, like a trip that you're going on or a hike or whatever, and a pilgrimage is the tourist complains, the pilgrim accepts.
wow.
So
I
the
get
pilgrim
that though.
accepts, it accepts. It might rain, you know what? And then we might get wet, but then we will dry. And, and so Yeah, it might be steep, but you'll just stop 1 foot in front of the other. A lot of them else would just say, just take 1 foot, put it in front of the other, in front of the other, in front of the other. You will
But
get
you're so right that there, I mean, just, sort of as this, as a, well, first of all, as a host of Grow Yourself from the Inside Out, and my head is just exploding with all these lessons that I'm hearing here. And one of them, but I want to harken back to something that you had said earlier and combine this with these conversations you had about what the path ahead was. You talked about, you know, um, that, some people show up with all this stuff, whether it be makeup, whether it be a book, whatever it is. And again, this is not to criticize, but just an observation that they're operating out of their normal paradigm, that there are certain things that they need to control and, or be conscientious of, including how they look. And I need a poncho too, or an umbrella, or whatever it is, and all of these things with some, even with the best of intentions, trying to control your environment, really trying to control your scene, where your existence at that moment, even in this pilgrimage. And then, to your point, you go with your natural paradigm again, as a former executive planner, strategic vision. Let's have all this correct before we step. Come on, this is a 4-week walk. We need to know what we're doing here. And you walk up to these people and they look at you like, no, I actually hadn't thought about any of that. And your point, I think part of what I hear you saying, Nancy, is that if we made this an analogy to life, it is just that sometimes you just should wake up and let it be,
let it
whatever
be.
it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever life is happening.
Yeah. I mean, within reason, I think.
Within reason, yeah. Well, I
within
noticed you said that too, that with
Yeah,
reasonable planning. I mean,
sure.
it's hard to even let go of that.
Yeah. So I think I love that you brought up this letting go. So here's the other thing that I really saw that was so great. And again, I can't emphasize it enough. Everybody's journey is different. So
Yes.
there's, I think, a letting go for most people that were there. There's a letting go of something. So some people, it could be those material possessions. So some people, I think, started out with minimal. That was going to be their game from the beginning, or their thing. That was going to be one of my things. I wanted to say, is this really all I need for 30 days? And I'm not going to
Yes.
add anything. Like, part of it too is that I was going to try that and again, I quickly kind of saw that the reason maybe that of some things I needed to work on. So part of it was going to be leaning in or sitting in times of discomfort, whether that be physical, or mental, or boring. I mean, there were stretches
Boredom,
of it
yeah.
flat out boring. And how often do we sit with boredom before we just like cut something or do something? So I thought, I'm going to learn. Part of my lesson is that I cannot, because of this, the way it's structured, and think I can't just, oh, I'm cold, I think I'll just get another jacket right now. I had what I had. That's all I had. So I'm going to be cold for a while. I'm going to be wet. I'm going to be hot. I'm going to be bored. I'm going to be hungry. So that's okay. So for some folks, though, that brought more, they either decided that's not a lesson that they need to learn. They'll have somebody transport that. That wasn't their lesson. Some decided, you know what? I don't need this stuff and I don't want to carry it anymore. So there goes my boots. There goes those extra boots I brought. There goes that extra poncho. I'm not carrying it anymore. And you would see things discarded sometimes in, strategic places along the way because they were discarding it. But what's really cool is part of, I would say, the majority of the people's journey is this giving up. So part of it, if in the planning, is you read in the literature and in everything that you think to bring a rock, to bring a stone with you from when you start. You carry this with you, which represents, what are you carrying with you? Is it anger, guilt, grief, pride, failure to forgive yourself, forgive someone else. So it's the burdens that you carry. And then about 3 weeks into the journey, if you're doing kind of the longer version, for us, it was about 3 weeks into the journey. And according to most of the planner, you hit it at about day 24, 23. There is a place called Cruz de Faro, and it's kind of this hill with this big, huge cross on it. And that is where people go up and they leave that rock.
Wow. I get it.
And symbolically, it is letting go. I'm leaving this. What is it that this represents? And some people bring several rocks. Some people bring, I walked with one woman for a while from Austria. She had lost her husband that she'd been married to for 30 some years, a couple years ago. She'd really been having a hard time moving forward with her life. And this part of why she was walking the Camino. When she got to Cruz de Faro, it was his picture and a rock. And she said it just symbolically, it let her go. She
letting go.
Yeah. Then like, I'm letting go. I have to let go and move on. Others letting go of whatever that is, right? Gosh. So there's this symbolism of kind of unloading and letting go as you walk this. I don't know too many people that like picked up extra rocks to carry.
Yeah, say, I need some of that. So let me grab this rock somebody left, Man, that is so powerful. Listen, I want to ask you about the story that you had mentioned about this this elderly gentleman that walked, but I want to set it up with this concept right here that sometimes I use this idea as an analogy to, learning, growing, even coaching. I mean, I use it in different contexts, and it goes like this. So if you're familiar with tennis at all, or, if the listeners are familiar with tennis at all, you know that one of the greatest tennis players of all time, Roger Federer, who is still playing, you could even say, make the same, bring this another person into the fold here, somebody like Serena Williams. These are both, by tennis standards, older players in their 40s, known to be the greatest of all time. They're legends, they're living legends, still playing, still incredible. And because I've studied Roger Moore, I know that he is a 100% student of the game. He's incredibly smart, strategic. He just almost epitomizes the perfect player. His technique is perfect, all of these sorts of things. And I would often ask people, like maybe even if whether it's a keynote speech or just a program that I'm doing, I'd say, what would you do if Roger Federer asked you to coach him? And you get it immediately, you'd be like, what could I possibly teach him? I mean, not only what could I possibly, what can anybody teach him? What this man, and again, you could say the same for Serena. They are the all-knowing. They are the gurus, the living gurus, and so I use it in the personal growth standpoint of saying that I promise you, if you were to ask Roger Federer or Serena Williams or Rafa Nadal or whomever that is at the, at the top of their game, they're the best of the best, they would tell you, yes, there's plenty of refinement that I still need to do.
I think so.
And they are aware of this, even at this incredible juncture of their career. And so kind of to the point that you were talking about earlier, that you learned more, that these sorts of things, that they lend themselves to all sorts of things, but including refinement. You talked about this man that was elderly, and I think he was a Buddhist or something like this. And I think to myself, was he 87 or something like this?
79.
Oh, he's 79. Okay, which is still, you
Yeah.
know, you would think and you kind of mentioned, I'm gonna let you take over the story here, but I want to set this up. You had mentioned that he was quite the intellectual. He seemed very refined, if you will. And
Yes.
yet
Very
the
comfortable. Yes.
the story that came out of this that you'd
Yes.
say, can you please talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So along the way, before I get to him, what was so incredible. So people do describe, I think if you talk to anybody or you read about the Camino, there's a lot of articles out there. There's a lot of books. Definitely there is themes, and there is themes of overcoming physical and mental challenges, overcoming that cumulative effect of walking every day. The whole idea of the slow walk. We don't do that anymore. We could do a lot of this stuff in our everyday life. You don't have to go to Spain, right?
Yeah, so you're not out there like this
Right.
walking, right?
The idea of walking every day, and you're just, you're walking, it gives you an appreciation for, how many times have you read novels or heard something else say it was a 2 days walk? Back then it was a 2 days walk. Well, we don't even know what that means. Now we know what that means. We think about Jesus and his apostles and his disciples, and they walked. They walked. And sometimes we would say that when we were having a hard day, and we'd be like, "Oh my gosh, how much longer?" And like, Jesus walked. He walked. Everybody, this person walked in history. They walked. The people before us walked, right? So it's this walking, and it's this. And then it is through this walking, through the absence of distractions, through the, I would say, de-emphasis of career, of status, of wealth, of what kind of car. Nobody cares. Wow. Nobody cares about any of that.
Oh, I get that.
So what's really left, and you can't really, in some ways, you can't recreate this here. Sure. And I think, Kevin, before I get to my story about the gentleman, how often do we spend so much energy when we interact with people, especially when we meet somebody new, trying to figure out, what are they thinking of me? What am I thinking of them? What are they going to judge me for? Whatever, my looks, the way that what I'm driving or not driving, the kind of job I have, what's going on with my children, all of this stuff is interference in us connecting with other people. So on the Camino, what so many people described was the camaraderie and the accelerated level at which they got to know people, because there wasn't that interference. And there's also that element of that people can be really frank with each other and share deep things about their life, because they trust them. I mean, you trust them like you trust a stranger. They're not going to go tell anybody about they're not going to share. And so everyone describes that this connection is so immediate because you're on this similar, unique journey, but there isn't this interference. You're all reduced to pretty minimal stuff. Nobody's dolled up or trying to, no pretense. So you really kind of start to have meaningful conversations. People did not talk about the news. They did not talk about politics. They did not talk. You might have a cursory, hey, what do you do? Or, where do you live or whatever. Sure. But people were not really that interested in that. They were interested about what made you want to walk the Camino. What's changed since when you first started out? We had lots of laughs. You have this kind of common humor then about things that only the people that were on the Camino would find funny, right? So what's interesting is it's not odd for somebody to start sharing somewhat deep thoughts with you as you kind of then start to meet people along the way. Everyone kind of says they start out either alone or in a small group, but by the end you have a pilgrim family. You keep running into kind of these same people because you're relatively on the same path. So, number of great stories, but one of them I thought was just really the epitome of how people kind of, the Camino transforms them. And for some people, they describe that transformation as the universe or the Camino, or just the goodness of other people. And some describe it as God. So it's kind of cool to see how that all kind of intertwines for different people. So I would say maybe a week into it, there's a group of us sitting at dinner, and I happen to just be sitting next to this 79-year-old man who was actually walking it with his granddaughter, who was 23. And it was interesting. And he did share a little bit about his life. He had a publishing company, and he had worked in other, I think, great industries. And he was very kind of well-spoken and pretty philosophical. And I think at some point, somebody brought up a church, and he had shared with the group that he was Buddhist and had always been Buddhist, and that really worked well for him, and that's good. And the other thing that's really cool is this immediate connection and camaraderie around strangers, so to speak, is oftentimes it makes you a better listener. You don't feel compelled to like interject into somebody else's life. Plus, the vibe of the Camino was like, that's
wow.
That's cool. I think that makes us better, part of that refinement.
Yes.
Right? And so that was just a casual dinner conversation. Okay, no big deal. So a few nights later, I think we find ourselves kind of in the same thing and had walked. And so what's interesting, I'll share this with you, is so there's some other symbolic things as you go along the Camino. Part of it is these scallop shells. You would get this somewhere. Many of them would start at the beginning. It's St. James had this scallop shell as part of when they sent his body across the water to Spain. It was filled with scallop shells. So this is representative of a pilgrim. People would hang this on their backpacks and things. But more importantly, this dates back to the Middle Ages, and I'm going to see how this intertwines with people's transformations and their refinement. You would have these passports this isn't the one I have stamped. Anyway, you would have this passbook that dates back. You have to get it from the credential office. And as you're going into wherever you're going to sleep at night, or you're going to churches, or sometimes where you're going to eat, they have a unique stamp, and they stamp your credentials, which is your status as a pilgrim. Wow. So again, dating back over the centuries, that was also your kind of like, this allowed you to stay at a certain monastery or church, or have a pilgrim meal. The temple, it identified you as a pilgrim. And that is today. You have to, when you show up at the cathedral in Santiago to get your credentials, you have to show your passport. But what that did is it brought a variety of people from all over and from all different belief systems, oftentimes into churches, because they were getting the stamps.
I see. Got it.
These stamps along the way. They go, oh, there's a church. I'm going to go in and get the stamp in the church. And some of these churches would literally have somebody at the back of church at a little table to greet pilgrims and stamp. So what was really neat, as again, somebody who is very faithful, to see people, to see pilgrims going into these churches and being touched by some of those experiences. Some of it was quite visible. There was one, though, this is enough, I'll get back to my guy, but there was this one tiny church. Some of them were fabulous European churches. With
just beautiful cathedrals. Yeah. Wow.
One of the most impactful ones that I read it in so many people's memoirs, on their blogs and everything. There is this little church with this nun. She is, like many nuns, very small in stature and in the habit, the full habit, and she's in this church. And she stamps people's books as they come in. And then she had these little medals on white string. I lost mine along the journey. I was so regretful of that. But when anyone would come in, she would stop, and we didn't understand anything she said. She spoke, Spanish. We didn't speak Spanish. People before and after me were not understanding what she said. But she would look you in the eye and just smile and pray and grab your hands, and she's praying, and then she gives you this thing. Men 30 years old, would come out of there with tears in their eyes. And I ran into one when he came out to me, he's like, I have no idea what she just said to me. And I don't even go to church. But he had
Oh
tears in his eyes.
my.
So, but what brought them in is, we might say God brought them in, but it was they needed the stamp. They wanted the stamp for their book.
So interesting.
Back to my Buddhist friend. So what I think was happening is, many of the churches, you would along the path see these churches and like, oh, I'm going to pop in there and look in there. A lot of them were really cool. Some of it was to get a stamp. Maybe some of it was just, to get out of the sun for a minute. But it was a stop along the way. It was part of the pilgrimage. So, run into him a little bit later and a couple of days later, and he made a comment and he said, something's kind of happening. And he said it to me and a couple others sitting there. He's like, I don't know. I have this urge to pray. Like I'm feeling like I want to pray, but I don't even know what I'm supposed to pray about. Because I don't even know that I believe in any of that.
Wow.
Because again, it was was very much somebody that would think through everything. Now, I'm already a couple weeks into my journey, so I'm working on my refinement of, I don't have to be the one to fit, like I don't have to jump in here.
Yeah,
so I really just said something kind of probably benign, like, well, that's great. That's really cool. I didn't all of a sudden gush all over him about, oh my God. So anyway, let it go. But, I think there were things that he would hear some of us sharing, or we would talk about different things and how things were working. And so a week later, we were at some place and he saw me again and he's like, oh, hey, Nancy, I have a question for you. So then he shares with me, he had just come from one of the larger towns and he had said, I told you, I've kind of felt like praying. I still don't really know what that's all about, but I'm having this urge, like I'd like to go sit in a church. I want to just sit in a church. I just want to sit there and kind of just think. And he had some things going on in his personal life, I thought, that were quite heavy, and understood that he might want to sit and think. And so he said he was wondering why some of the churches were locked, and we had a short discussion about maybe artifacts and valuables and things like that. So, that was it. So now we're getting to the end. Last week, again, some of us are sitting around and many people are lamenting about reflecting on their journey and how the Camino provided. Like, they're like, it's true. Like, this is that other say that everyone's like, it's kind of like the times when we didn't think we were going to have a place to stay. And all of a sudden, some stranger said there's a place over there, or we were lost. And all of a sudden somebody helped us.
Wow, man.
I was struggling with something. And on the day that I was really struggling with something, like all of a sudden I started walking with somebody who had the same experience.
The answer, or they whatever, yes.
Many people had stories. And I think what's, again, a little bit of a side bar on this, I think, Kevin, is that because people were tapped into it, because they were free of the distractions, because they had their radar up, right? About, I heard the Camino provides. But I think that's true in life, in many of our days, that whether it's people want to believe the universe provides, or whatever they believe in is providing, or the goodness in people provided for them, or for those of us that, are faith-based, that God provides, it's always providing. He's always providing, or whatever their belief system is. But we're drowning it out oftentimes.
Yes.
Because of the distractions, because of hurry.
I literally wrote down the distractions.
Yes. Or how often are we so busy that we're not talking to the person that's standing in the line ahead of us? We're looking at our phone. And maybe that person that was waiting in line at the post office for us, had we talked to them a little bit, now, albeit we wouldn't get to the essence of some meaningful conversation immediately like you do in this other environment. However, we may find, wow, God or the universe or whatever put that person in my path today because they knew I needed somebody to say something funny and made me laugh because I was having a bad
Yes.
day. Or somebody just said, you know, what a nice smile you have, Kevin. It was really good to meet you. But we're not allowing room for any of that. So what I saw in the Camino is that everybody was on kind of high alert for how this was going to provide for them and show up for them, which I think is really fabulous. So some people were again talking about that in reflection. It's like, isn't that amazing? The Camino really does provide. I mean, there were stories about, oh my gosh, my blisters were just at this level of, oh, they were just killing me. And this stranger sits down next to me and offers me, you know, some of their bandages and some of their cream, the kindness of people, you know. And so they were talking about that. And so I had just, you know, made it. I knew now this was probably the last time I would ever see this gentleman. And I just said, hey, you know, said his name. And I said, I just, you know, really was been great getting to know you off and on along the way. And, you know, I just have a couple things I want to say. And, you know, for me, you know, that, you know, part of this has been my faith pilgrimage, but how many people believe the Camino has provided, you know, those of us with faith, that's how we feel, like that we are always provided for through our faith in God, and that not immediately and sometimes not right away. Like we have to learn from the struggle and the discomfort at times, but that we trust that it will work out. As you guys, many of everyone's trusted the Camino is going to make sure that it's all okay. And then the last thing I said is I want to, you know, it would be okay if I prayed for you and your family. And he, you know, he got tears in his eyes. And several weeks after I got back, he reached out to me and wanted to get my email address and send me an email. And I think this is just such a great story. And it's the story of so many.
It's beautiful.
He said, you know, as you know, I shared with you at the beginning of the journey that I was doing it to change my granddaughter's life, that I wanted her to be changed by this. And instead, or in addition to, it changed my life. And one of those areas it has changed my life is, for the first time in probably 79 years, I have started to think about God.
I mean, that's just,
and isn't that great?
mind-blowing.
So, you know, that's his story. I think others, you know, it can be just that they started to think about maybe again the refinement of themselves. They've started to think more about their family. They've started to think more about a lot of young people, talk to a lot of young people, probably in their 20s and 30s. They were walking it. Some of it was to get clarity on, like, they had already been, one guy 3 to 5 years into a job out of college and is like, I can't do this the rest of my life. I need clarity. I need to kind of think about, what do I really want to do with some meaning? And so I would say a common theme with whatever it was that people were seeking, and even if it was just fun, a lot of people, it was just, let's have a good time.
Yeah,
Let's have fun with some people from other cultures that, you know, it is about the connecting with nature, doing it slow. You could walk or bike. Most people were walking the Camino. A couple people were biking it, but slowing down and getting away from the distractions and trying to get away from that need to fill every bit of silence or every little gap in our schedule. How am I going to fill that? So I think that we're not allowing enough room sometimes for our own refinement, but we're not really allowing enough time to see that each and every day, God or the universe or other people, they're showing up. They're showing up for us.
This is just nothing short of amazing from my vantage point here, listening to you talk. And what's interesting, Nancy, is I'd been kind of writing words down as you started talking. And there were 4 words that really popped up. 2. So one of them was clarity. You just mentioned that. The other one was distractions. The other one, and this to me was one of the biggest one that I heard you speak about, acceptance. You spoke about the people that you met out there, and that they're and the fourth one was expectations. And so I kind of put those two together as I'm listening to you, hearing you say that let go of your expectations, you know accept, accept. And these are my words, but I, what I'm getting from what you're saying is you're with all these people, you meet them, and you don't have these you don't have expectations of them, and you
Mm-hmm.
simply accept wherever they're at. So you're
Mm-hmm.
a woman of faith. I've known you for a long time, and I know you're a real woman of faith. Yet you meet this 79-year-old Buddhist, and you said it, you outright said it. You didn't feel like you needed to judge that or think about it or accept it or not accept it. You just let it be. And then and then this notion of, and all of this is analogous to our lives, right? That we live life with all these distractions that, if you want to say, and I'll say it, that I know that I've asked this before: God, where are you in all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Where
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling here. Where are you? And he's there, all along. It's not that he has left, and you've heard this before, and other people said this. It's the distractions, or
Mm-hmm.
it's the expectations of what he should be doing, or
Exactly.
what should happen with you. You ask for these things, and they don't happen in the same way. But in all of this, the way that you described it is that you start this walk and you just let the distractions go. You don't have these great expectations about what will happen. And then the clarity comes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, you use these words, and I certainly accept every bit of what you're saying, but you said that that everybody's on high alert. I might even argue that you're not on alert at all.
Mm-hmm.
You're just accepting this
Mm-hmm.
for what it is, and you're clearing the distractions, and then you're suddenly like, oh wow, there it
Mm-hmm.
is right there. That's
Mm-hmm.
the answer, and it was probably there for 79 years.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's
Wow.
interesting about that mindset is that, and again, if we could just apply this to our life more often,
Yes.
yeah, I think there were times that it was like there was, I think it's your attitude about this. We justified a lot of times, people did justified even things that we could characterize as things that went wrong. But and so we should do, not always, I mean, some things are like super serious, more serious than I'm going to describe. But for example, sometimes we would get lost, or somebody else would get lost. The path was not like always clearly marked. You're looking for either these scallop shells or these yellow arrows, and sometimes yellow arrows are painted with spray paint on the bottom of the curb. So it could take you off course. You've already walked a long way, and now you've got to walk even further. But people, not everybody, but people would say things like, yeah, I got lost, or we got lost, but you know what, if I wouldn't have gotten lost, then I wouldn't have ever met Kevin. Or, we got lost, but oh my gosh, you should have saw the view we saw that we wouldn't have seen had we. So oftentimes they would back into a situation that could be categorized difficult or frustrating, within this context. I'm not talking
Yes.
about like we can't always do this
Sure.
with some of things that life really throws us. But there was a lot of that had it not happened, then this wouldn't have happened. So I think oftentimes, even in things in our lives that are not super, super serious, we get amped up about it. We get frustrated because it didn't happen the way we wanted it to happen.
Mm.
or we're mad at ourselves because, yep, this happened, instead of thinking, okay, but what else happened? What else happened then that could be good? Or what did I learn from that? And then sometimes it could even just be a mindset of, again, I remember one day walking, and shortly after we started, it rained, and it rained hard. And it was one of the first day of hard rain. And I then realized that the rain jacket that I packed, because it was so light, was really not waterproof, but perhaps what they call like rain, like water resistant.
Water resistant, yes.
I was soaked to the bone early on.
Wow.
Right down to the skin. And had to walk. I mean, I walked in that all day. Didn't just walked for hours and hours and hours with head down and soaking wet. Okay, so that's pretty uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable, and it was really cold. But then what happens that night when I'm nice and dry and I'm laying in bed, I think it's so nice to feel dry. And, it's that kind of thing. It's like, what can I appreciate from that?
Yes.
And so I think
And that you can't have that appreciation without the other,
the struggles, right?
The struggles, yes.
Yes. And a lot of it, there was some of the stages that, there was quite an ascent, and you're walking uphill, and then you would get up there and think, wow, but then look at this beauty,
Yes.
So there's just different, I think that people go into it. Most of the people then are there maybe with a little bit of a different mindset, at least for that period of time that they're on the Camino. And then I think the most that we can ask for is that we take some of those key lessons and we try to hold on to them when we get back home into our regular life, And then again, as we started out the conversation, it's just kind of that refinement and being, maybe that little bit better version of ourselves as we kind of keep going through this life,
Wow. And you bring back to life this idea that, many of us, we look at our lives and sometimes we just think we're so jacked up or that let me back off of that we think that there is so much that we have to do to find peace, joy, life balance, work-life balance, whatever it is. And sometimes it's just one little tweak that you have to make in life. Like, for instance, now we would probably both agree that, on the larger scheme of things, that if I say one tweak might be to simply just accept things a little bit more, accept people around you and where they're at a little bit more, that can easily fall into the category of simple but not easy. Because we have, because of your point that if we use this analogy of the Camino, that we are carrying so much baggage, and what we're really complaining about is the heavy weight that we're carrying, and not so much the person that we're staring at. So, but the point, so that can be a little bit more complicated, but sometimes it's not this huge thing that you have to do in your life. Right. I remember, speaking of, I don't know if it wouldn't be called a pilgrimage, but a mission trip that I took with my daughters. Interesting enough, I took them to not fix them, but to teach them a life lesson. They were young teenagers, and I walked away the same as your friend, going, and by the way, we went down on this mission trip to help these people in Nicaragua who were struggling with life and poverty. And I walked away going, what was I thinking? I mean, I was the student. I was the lame. I was the heartbroken individual that these people taught me way beyond what I could have ever taught them. You see, it was just a beautiful thing. And there was a very similar story there, though, and that was that they didn't have a lot, yet the people were so beautiful, with all of those things. And I just learned so much by reflecting on. I remember Christina, my oldest daughter, came back, and I know my youngest, Alexandra, had a similar experience, that you know, she was a ninth or 10th grader and came back, you know, after her first day back to school. This was after school break, and just livid about, you know, I was like, Christina, what's wrong? She said, Dad, I'm just, you know, after doing Nicaragua, I'm just so, it's so crazy what my friends complain about, you know.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, you see, gosh, the lessons are so abundant here, Nancy. I could go on and on and on. But, you know, before we conclude here, two things I want to get to. One, I want to ask in a moment where people can kind of reach out to you, but I would like to know, you know, what's your next move in life? You know, I know that you are a mentor and you coach and all of those people, you know, here's Nancy Lane, you know, you need a good mentor or coach, Nancy, reach out to her. But I just look more and want to know about, you know, what's just, you know, what's next for you.
Yeah, I think, and you and I've talked a little bit about this. Well, a couple things on the travel side. I am contemplating, and you saw a lot of people do. They kind of get addicted to the Camino. They do
I
it
can
over and over.
imagine.
So I'm
Yeah. Oh,
already
I'm thinking about it. I got to be honest with you.
putting some things in motion. I may do one of the other routes. I may next year do the Portuguese route, which takes you up the coastline of Portuguese and up the deal.
Oh, that would
So
be extraordinary. Yeah.
yeah, that would be great. So I'll keep traveling and stuff. And I think, you know, what I'd like to do, what I've started to do is to set them some things in motion, to do some individual or group coaching and things. Now, again, my background is primary leadership. But as you and I talked, oftentimes this kind of thing about I really do feel a lot of passion for helping people realize that so much of what they already offer the world and the people that they interact with is so good. And I think people
Mm,
there's so much of a slant towards people that are you've got to improve this and you've got to improve
yeah.
in this area and this that it makes a lot of people feel they're just not measuring up. And
Mm,
I like to work with people and talk to people about you're already doing so many things so well. It's
mm,
about that refinement. It's about what are those small
yeah.
steps that you can take that can make a big difference, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. So I definitely want to do more of that. I've been doing some of that. I like to do that. And just help people again see the beauty that they already have within them and that it's just it's not such a stretch.
You know, and yes, to your point, you know, what, you know, maybe you just need to throw that rock out of there. Maybe that's all you need is you're carrying this burden of maybe like you said, the woman that lost her husband, I think you said,
Yeah.
who finally realized that she, you know, and this was my own mind saying this, that she was hanging on to this grief and these deep memories and this sort of this bond to him, and that maybe even perhaps she felt guilt by to let go of that.
Mm-hmm.
You see that she spent these 30 something years with him, and that felt bad about letting go and moving on,
Mm-hmm.
but that was a burden for her, really. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he's gone, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, God rest his soul.
Mm-hmm.
But she took that rock and left it there and said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving my grief behind. And that was just a small thing that could have changed her life, or
Sure.
the Buddhist that you talked about. So, you know, but I will say, Nancy, for the people that don't know you, I had referred a client of mine, a professional woman, a very serious professional, to you, who was looking for a strong mentor. And if you want to make this technical and formal, the reviews were just off the charts in you mentoring her for several months. I think it was probably at least 6 months, right? Or more.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know.
we're still
Oh, you're
have
still working.
we're still
But
engaged
she
in
had sent
some
me an
discussions.
email
Yeah.
just a few weeks ago, just profoundly thanking me for referring her to you or you to her. And so I think people out there, be you a man or a woman, but
Uh-huh.
I just want to highly recommend you. And I
Thank you.
didn't even pause to refer her to you because I already knew what kind of person and professional you were. But I think there's nothing better than to hear, I didn't go, oh, thank you. I'm glad Nancy would. I knew it would, but she
Yeah.
just talked so incredibly about you. And I think the people listening and watching,
Yeah.
if you need a coach or mentor, you should
And that's
consider
another
Nancy.
thing. Yes, I do love to help people navigate their ways through those sticky
Yeah.
workplace
Yeah.
situations that we all find ourselves
Yes.
into, and often sometimes just need somebody that's outside the arena of
Yeah,
drama to help
exactly.
sort through
Yes.
strategies. And
Yeah. So
excellent.
it's a beautiful thing. So Nancy, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way that they could be in touch with you?
I think, yeah, they could reach out to me through LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn,
Just look for
or,
Nancy Lane, and I'll put those in the show
yeah,
notes.
that'd be
Yeah.
great. Yes, and I could always send you my email to Kevin.
Okay. Okay. And I can put
Yeah,
that in the show notes as well. Yeah.
absolutely.
And if they reach out to you on LinkedIn, and particularly if they're interested in coaching
Yes,
or mentoring, that they should probably drop that in a note when they're reaching
that'd be
out to you
great.
so that
Yeah, that would be
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, that they're not selling you Bitcoins or something like
Yes,
this,
that'd be great.
So,
Yeah, that'd be
well,
great.
listen, goodness gracious, I'm not surprised at all, but this just was such a beautiful conversation, and the wisdom that you shared, I guarantee folks are walking away from this. I will say one last thing that maybe you should consider, and I would probably sign up, maybe you being a guide on the Camino for us. I will ask you real quick though, just very quickly. So what would one day, what would one day take to walk? So you said 15 or 20 miles. What is that, 4 hours or 8 hours or
Yeah, it's more like it'd probably be like 8 hours. Everyone
it
walks at
is?
a different pace. So we would
Yeah.
usually start walking. Some people get up, and that's the other thing. It's cool. You see the sunrise many days
Oh,
going down
lovely. I
there.
can
But
imagine.
sometimes
Yeah.
we would maybe we try to get there. Now the group varied. Like a couple of people wanted to get up
Sure.
really early and get where they were going to be and relax then. I kind of fell into a pattern with two of the other gals that I was with. We'd try to hit the pavement around 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock. But then
Yeah.
if we found something interesting along the way, or we would stop for a cafe, at a cafe, stop somewhere for lunch, we tried to get to our destination by 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Did you also, even though you had went with a small group, did you also walk by yourself, or
Yes.
maybe even that was a large
Yes.
part of it?
Well, and this is the other thing
Mm.
I'll say, Kevin, that was kind of cool about kind of the vibe on the Camino, is it was the one place too where it was super appropriate to just say to somebody like, it was really nice meeting you, but I'm going to walk alone now. Or like we would invite maybe somebody to like, hey,
Mhm.
Kevin, do you feel free to join us? And you could say, no, thank you. I'm just going to eat by myself tonight.
And nobody thinks
Because
of it. Yeah.
it's just obviously understood that part of it is people want alone
Yes.
time. So it was very easy to fall into conversation with somebody. Maybe you talk for an hour and then they'd say, okay, I'm gonna hold back now, or you go on ahead because I just want to walk alone. And you didn't take that personally,
Oh, man.
So yes, there
Just
were days
love it.
that like I would say, hey guys, today I'm just gonna walk alone for
Yeah.
for a while. And so that was just great because that was
Yes.
part of it too, is you just wanted to be alone. And
Well, for those people listening, I want to know, and I'm going to tell you straight up right now that I have heard about the Camino. I, I know of the movie The Way. I don't even remember. I can't remember any movies I watched, but I may have watched it, but I'm certainly familiar with it. I'm going to go watch it. But I can tell you hands down, I'm doing that Camino
oh yeah,
de Santiago. I'm just going to,
you have
because
to.
of just
Yes.
what you described. And so, and I would like to know, to all of our viewers and listeners, make a comment, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever it is, whether you are convinced that you ought to go to, because
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing in so many different ways.
Yes.
Nancy
And
Lane.
when you start planning it, there's a lot of like, should I do this or should I do that? And the other thing they always say, it's your Camino. There's
It's
no
your,
right or wrong way to do
there's
it.
no,
It's
yes, they're
everybody
both
has
good.
their
Pick
own
one.
journey.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Nancy Lane, thank you so much for taking the time and spending time with me and my viewers, and really imparting some great ideas and wisdom and fun too. So thank you
Oh,
so much.
it's so great talking to you again, Kevin.
God bless you. Look forward to talking to you again
All
soon.
right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
Yeah. Bye.
Hey, everybody. Listen, thanks again for joining me for another episode of Grow Yourself from the Inside Out. My mission here with this podcast is quite simple, and that is to provide good ideas and content that will help us become better people and professionals. That is to help us all learn and grow from the inside out. Of course, I don't have all the answers, so I invite guests who are willing to have a conversation and share their insight into various subjects. With all that said, if there's a topic or an idea that you would like me to explore, please drop me a note, send an email to growyourselfpc@gmail.com. That's growyourselfpc@gmail.com. And, or by the way, if you know someone who has a compelling life story or depth into a topic, and you think they'd be a great guest, please, by all means, same thing, drop me a line, and I'll look forward to hearing from you. So until next time, take care.